In this section, we're going to be talking about converting fractions, decimals, and percents. Always a good review. We're going to start by doing some examples. Let's look at changing a fraction to a decimal. When you change a fraction to a decimal, you want to start by dividing the bottom into the top, or the denominator into the numerator. So for example, if I have 1/2, I'm going to divide 2 into the numerator 1. And I'll need to change that into 1.0. So 1/2 equals 0.5 because 2 goes into 1.0 0.5 times. If I'm going to change a decimal to a fraction, I'm going to do this by putting the number over the place value and simplifying the fraction. So for example, if I have 0.5, I would put 5 over 10 because 0.5 is actually 5/10. The 5 is in the 10th place. So that's why I put 5 over 10, and then I simplify to equal 1/2. Next, we're going to talk about changing a fraction to a percent. When you change a fraction to a percent, you can set up a proportion and solve. We know that percent means out of 100. So I can write my percent equal to x over 100 to see how much out of 100 that fraction equals. So for example, 1/2 would equal x over 100. And when I cross multiply, I get 2 times x, which is 2x, 1 times 100, which is 100, divide both sides by 2, or multiply by the reciprocal, and I get x equals 50. Since 50 is over 100, I know that I need to put a percent sign at the end, because that actually means 50% when it's not written over the 100. If I change a decimal to a percent, the way I do that is by multiplying by 100, which actually moves the decimal 2 places, making it look like a bigger number instead of a smaller number. So 0.5 equals 50%. Now they have the same value. 0.5 is a half, is 50%. That means the same amount. If we're talking about 0.5 of a pizza, that's 50% of a pizza, or a half of a pizza. But I always think about it as the percent looks like it's a bigger number even though it's the same value. And that helps me to remember which way to move the decimal. So we're actually moving it 2 places to the right. The next thing is changing a percent to a decimal. So if we have a percent and we change it back to the decimal, we're actually moving the decimal back 2 places to the left and making it look like a smaller number, even though it means the same value. So we do that because we're actually dividing by 100. So remember that percent means out of 100. So 50% means 50 out of 100. And when we change it to a decimal, that's why we have to divide. And when we change it to a percent, that's why we have to multiply by 100. Next, we have changing a percent to a fraction. And the way you change a percent to a fraction is by putting the number over 100 and simplifying. So for example, if we have 50%, percent means over 100 or out of 100, so 50 over 100 equals 1/2. So next, let's talk about some further examples. So let's say we have 2/10, which equals 1/5. 2/10 is going to be 0.2 because 2/10 is in the 10th place, or you can divide 5 into 1 to get 0.2. We can change the decimal into 20% by moving the decimal 2 places. Here I have 1/4 of a percent. And I'm actually going to move down here and go through some of these examples in more detail. So I can change 1/5 to 0.2 by dividing. I can change 1/5 directly to a percent by setting it equal to x over 100, or I can change it to a decimal first. For the next example, I'm just converting 1/4 of a percent to a fraction. So again, percent means out of 100, so I'm going to put 1/4 of a percent over 100. So 1/4 of a percent means 1/4 out of 100. And I'm converting it into a fraction. So that means 1/4 divided by 100. And 1/4 divided by 100 is 1/4 times 1 over 100, because when you divide, you have to multiply by the reciprocal with fractions. And that's just 1 over 400. If I want to change 1/4 of a percent to a decimal, I'm going to first change 1/4 into 0.25 by dividing 4 into 1. And then I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to change the percent into a decimal. Next, I'm going to talk about 3.026 and how to convert that to a percent and a fraction. I can convert 3.026 to a fraction. First thing I need to do is put the 0 to 6 over the place value of the 6, which is tenths, hundredths, thousands. So 26 goes over 1,000 because that's what place value the 6 ends in. So 3 is our whole number. We don't need to put 0 to 6. We can just put 26 or 26 thousandths, and then we just simplify to get 3 and 13 over 500. To convert 3.026 to a percent, you just move that decimal 2 places, 1, 2, because you're multiplying by 100, so you get 302.6%. And that makes sense because whenever we have one whole, that's 100%. So if we have 3 wholes, that's 300%. If we have slightly over 3 wholes, that's slightly over 300%. Next, we're going to talk about 7 2/5% and how to change it to a fraction. So first of all, we're going to put 7 2/5% over 100. Because percent means out of 100, and that automatically changes it to a fraction. But now I need to simplify this fraction because we can't leave a fraction in the numerator of a fraction. So I'm going to change 7 2/5 to an improper fraction. And then 37/5, the improper fraction, divided by 100 is the same as 37/5 times 1 over 100. I'm just multiplying by the reciprocal since you can't divide fractions. And you just multiply. If you can cross-cancel, great, but in this case we can't, so we're just going to multiply straight across, and we get 37 over 500. And for our last problem, we're going to change 7 2/5% to a decimal. So the first thing we're going to do is divide the numerator by the denominator. So 2 divided by 5 equals 0.4. So this is actually 7.4%. Now we're going to change 7.4% to a decimal by moving our decimal 2 places to the left and dropping the percent sign because we're dividing by 100. So that concludes how to convert fractions, decimals, and percents, as well as some harder examples of each.